Well, good evening. This is Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and it's nice to be back with you here at the Jacob Hornberger Show. Quite a week, huh? With all the debt ceiling catastrophe that took place. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you, I told you so, right? Those of you who have been listening to me on this show, what have I been saying? Week after week, starting months ago. The conservatives are going to cave. I said it week after week whenever we were discussing this. I said it in my articles. Now, remember, the conservatives were saying, and a lot of the Tea Party people, we're not going to give in to this thing. The debt is so enormous, it is a threat to national security. Spending is out of control. We're not going to give Obama one dime more to go out and borrow and saddle the American people with this unbelievable debt that's already sitting on their backs. I mean, we heard that time after time from the conservatives, from the Tea Party people. They were not going to give in. This was no more business as usual. No more Mr. Nice Guy. And I kept saying, they're going to cave. They're going to cave. They're going to cave. And, you might say, well, Jacob, how could you be so sure about this? I mean, they were steadfastly saying they weren't going to give in. Why? Because I've seen conservatives for years and years and years. And every time they preach the preach, they'll talk the talk, but they cannot walk the walk. That is what's so sad. This is what distinguishes us, at least one of the things that distinguishes us libertarians from conservatives. We stand with our principles. We don't just talk the principles. We don't just say, free enterprise, private property, and limited government, which, of course, is one of the favorite mantras of the conservatives. You can go to their websites, it's there. You can go to their speeches, it's always there. You can go to their stationery, it's there. It's always there. Free enterprise, private property, and limited government. Now it's fiscal responsibility, and I'm against big spending and big government, and all this stuff. But when push comes to shove, they throw in the towel. They surrender. They give up. They cannot stand the pressure. They can't stand the pressure from the news media. And there was a lot of pressure. Remember, the pundits were saying there's going to be a catastrophe. Oh my gosh, the stock market will plunge hundreds of points. And oh my gosh, the nation won't stand anymore. And oh my gosh, maybe the terrorists and the communists and the illegal aliens will come and take us over. I mean, there was all this huge pressure brought by the mainstream statist pundits, and of course, the pundits that are writing for the mainstream media, of course, are statists. I mean, the mainstream media is owned by statist big corporations, statist bigwigs. It stands to reason they're going to hire statist reporters and statists and so forth. I mean, it's one of the reasons why people are coming to the internet. Thank goodness for the internet, right? Because there you get the real truth from the libertarians, from the people that are skeptical of government, that know government officials lie. But we had all these, catastrophe predictions, and the conservatives, and a lot of the Tea Party people, they just caved. They just couldn't give into that pressure. And then, of course, there was the fear that these congressmen felt, the fear of, oh my gosh, somebody's going to write in and say, where's my Social Security check? Where's my Medicare check? See, because they could have prioritized. I mean, they have a certain amount of money coming in through taxes. Let's say it's $2 trillion. They're spending, almost $4 trillion. Well, as they get in this money every month, thanks to their, loyal IRS, all they got to do is say, okay, we're going to pay our debts first, and then we're going to see what's left over, and then we're going to decide what to pay over here. Should it be the troops? Should it be the Social Security recipients, the Medicare recipients, all the dole recipients, you see? And so, they would have to make choices here. It wasn't necessarily going to be this default, because they didn't have to default. They could pay the interest on the debt with the money coming in, but they couldn't stand the pressure from the dole recipients. They were terrified that Obama would use the money to pay, the debtors pursuant to the contract that had been entered in with them, and said, look, the dole recipients, we just don't have the money. I mean, we're broke, And and of course all the dole recipients, the Social Security, the Medicare, the foreign dictators, the farm subsidy people, and everybody that's on the dole, the education grant people, community grants, all the dole recipients would have been screaming. That's what scared the conservatives. That's what scared the Tea Party people. They said, oh my gosh, we can't put up with that kind of pressure. So it was the pressure from the news media, which of course are the statist commentators and so forth, especially the liberal ones. And then of course it was the pressure from losing votes. And this is how I knew they would cave. Because if you go all the way back to the New Deal, in the 1930s, when this was the revolutionary period in American life where America adopted a brand new economic system, the welfare state, abandoning the concept of voluntary charity and free enterprise and free markets, and went with this socialistic, fascistic system, interventionist system that Franklin Roosevelt imported from the German socialists. Otto von Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Germany, he had it over there in Germany. Roosevelt imports it, adopts it, uses the crisis of the Great Depression to impose this system on the American people. And it was a newfangled system. I mean, that was where Social Security started. And, for a while the conservatives fought it. But after, Roosevelt got it barreled through, the conservatives just folded. Just folded. Why? Because they said, how do we get elected to public office? How are the voters going to vote for us when the Democrats are out there giving them freebies? In other words, instead of fighting for a principle, instead of saying, look, we're not going to abandon our principles, we're going to fight to restore economic liberty to America, the conservatives threw in the towel back in the 1930s. They did the same thing in the 60s with Lyndon Johnson. I mean, here Johnson, the protege of Franklin Roosevelt, he comes up with this idea of free medical care. And you know what, fellas, I just realized that my battery's about going low. I'm really sorry. I'm going to have to suspend this and go get my my plug-in. Sorry about that. You guys bear with me about 3 minutes here. That's exciting. All right, here we go again. Sorry about that. Get myself fixed up here again. Sorry, no producers here, self-producing this show. Okay, we're back. So now Lyndon Johnson's over here. He's got free medicine for people, free health care. So, hey, who's going to object to that, Fidel Castro's got it. North Korea's got it. The Soviet Union had it. I mean, that's what socialism's all about. And so the Republicans said, well, okay, we got to throw in the towel because how do we compete with that? So, and we've seen it time and time again. Every socialist program down the pike, the conservatives have supported. Farm subsidies, education grants, public schooling. I knew they would cave. Why? Because they believe in the welfare state. They believe in the warfare state. They believe in these things. And so, big surprise that they caved there at the last minute. And they give Obama $2.7 extra trillion to borrow over the next 2 years. And, pass the election, of course, because we don't want to get people mad, I mean, boy, at election time. So, yeah, we gotta have this debate after the election. Well, this country's in deep trouble, and the reason it's in deep trouble is because of this system, this welfare state, this warfare state. You see, after the big revolution in the 1930s, when America got this welfare state system, and it's like a cancer. I mean, it starts with Social Security, and it was supposed to be just for this emergency of the Great Depression. Oh, which, by the way, was caused by the Federal Reserve System, the central bank. But they've been telling people ever since that no, it was free enterprise that failed, free enterprise that failed. Well, it was people like Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek, the Austrian economist, Milton Friedman, that was showing no, it was the Federal Reserve that caused the Great Depression. Bernanke, he ultimately admitted that in a dinner in honor of Milton Friedman. You can see that online. Just Google Bernanke birthday party for Milton Friedman. And so, even some of the statists are admitting that the Federal Reserve did this. But, we got to carry these myths on in public schools about, failure of free enterprise and Franklin Roosevelt saved free enterprise. That's just nonsense. So he brings in this socialist system. They don't call it Social Security for nothing. They're taking from the people who have income and wealth. They're forcibly giving it to the seniors of that day who had paid no taxes into the system as we hear it today. And so then starts this cavalcading, cascading system through the decades, where each generation says, well, I put it in, I got a right to take it out. But what's really happening is each generation's taken from the young people, because the people that took from them are already dead. And then you get Medicare, and then you get the farm subsidies, and you get all this junk, and it's like a cancer. It grows and grows and grows, and until finally, your private sector that's sustaining all this stuff, this junk, it starts to crater. Because they keep saying, tax more, tax more, tax the rich, tax the rich. Well, every time they tax the rich, for a while, that private sector can sustain the burden of the parasitic sector. But finally, all of a sudden, the parasitic sector says, man, we want more, we want more, we want more. Everybody starts lining up, the farmers, the corporations, the banks, the businesses, the SBA loans, the dictators. Don't forget the dictators. They're on the dole too, the foreign aid, and Social Security, Medicare. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger. The private sector can't handle it anymore, especially when they start taking out not just income, but capital out of the private sector, and they keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing because, they don't want to tax too much because that gets people mad. And that's essentially what's happening in Greece. I mean, in Greece, they've had the welfare state for decades. They used to brag about, everything's free, education, health care, and so forth. Yeah, how free? They're all busted and broke, begging for foreign assistance to help them pay their bills. And they still don't want to eliminate their welfare system. The people start protesting just like here. I mean, just like what would have happened here with this debt ceiling thing if it had not been enacted. You'd have had the Social Security recipients, the Medicare recipients, the farmers, the dictators. They'd all been screaming, where's my check? Where's my check? That's what's happening in Greece. They're just as scared, those politicians, of the dole recipients as the politicians here are scared. And so they can't cut anything. Oh, yeah, they play like they're cutting a little bit and so forth. But they're begging the Germans and the Americans, hey, your taxes went to support that Greek bailout too. They use the IMF as the funnel so it doesn't look like that's happening. But that's exactly what's happening. Your money goes from your pocket to the IRS, to the IMF, to Greece. Oh, and guess what? Now it's Italy. And did you see where they went in there and busted down the doors of the rating agency, the credit rating agency? I mean, they took the people away, claiming that, they're doing horrible things because they're reporting on the financial condition of what's going on in the government. I mean, look, these people, the credit agencies, they're just expressing an opinion. They're just telling investors, people like you and me, this is what your government's doing. It's lying to you. It's borrowing out the gazoo. It's piling debt on top of debt, and they're falsifying the figures, and that's all these credit agencies are doing. And they are hated by these public officials. I mean, they hate them. That's why Italy reacted that way. Oh, by the way, did you see what happened yesterday? S&P, the credit reporting agency, downgraded American bonds. Now, Remember what they were saying on the eve of the debt ceiling vote. They were saying, oh, if we don't do this, there's going to be a stock market crash. Oh my gosh, we have to do this. Did you see what happened after they approved it? I mean, like a 700-point drop, I think it was, in the stock market. Can you imagine? I mean, it was like there was the market saying, no, this is not a good thing that you just did. You just enabled this man in office, the president, to borrow another $2.7 trillion. Stack it on the trillions of dollars that Americans already owe. Every person owes some $46,000, but it's really much more than that because that's counting children. And, we all know they can't pay, so your proportionate amount is much more than that. And so the S&P credit reported agency downgraded American bonds, first time in American history. Now, the statists are saying, oh, well, it couldn't have anything to do with the massive debt and the spending in this country. Oh no, it's got to do something with the credit crisis, in Europe. I mean, that's what they were saying when the stock market crashed. I mean, it was really funny because if the debt ceiling had not been lifted, then what would have happened is in the stock market, it plunged 700 points. They would have said, see, it was a failure to lift the debt ceiling. But they lift the debt ceiling, the market crashes, and what do they say? Oh, well, it doesn't have anything to do with the fact that we just added on more debt. It has something to do with the credit crisis in Europe. This is just nonsense. And so the credit agencies are saying, hey, there is now a risk of default, perhaps slight, but not because the credit ceiling's not going to be lifted, because it's just been lifted. What they're saying is there's a threat of default here, a risk of default, because you owe too much money. You're a deadbeat. All you do is just keep borrowing money. Now, and now remember what they were saying on the eve of this thing too. I'm talking about the statists. I'm talking about the Democrats. I'm talking about the liberals. I'm talking about the mainstream reporters and the pundits. They were saying, oh my gosh, we will reform. I mean, we don't have a choice here. There's a recession. We have to raise this debt ceiling. It's going to be a catastrophe. But I kept saying, were they worried about this ceiling for the past 2 years? Were they concerned about it? Did they say, you know what, we need to rein in some spending here because we're coming up against a ceiling, and a ceiling's not supposed to be raised? Not in the least. They were spending like there was no tomorrow. Bombing Libya. Now, if there was ever an optional bombing campaign, that was it. Now, I don't know how much it cost, but the point is they didn't care. They just say, yeah, drop a few more bombs. We got plenty of money. And anyway, the debt ceiling is going to be raised. What are we worried about? And it's the same thing. They were making no concerted effort saying, we need to slash spending. And let me tell you something. They're not going to do it either for the next 2 years. They're going to keep spending. They're going to keep borrowing. Now notice, what they should be doing right now, they should be saying, okay, the American people, through their congressmen, agreed to let us get by for 2 more years. But that's it. Now we've got to really, we need to start abolishing things. We need to cut spending about in half here. And they're not doing it. They're not going to do it for a bit. And that's why the S&P credit rating group is saying that. They're saying, look, they're not going to do anything here. Now, when they say we're going to cut, there's another, fraud. When they say, oh, well, we're cutting spending, that's just a fraud. You know who that's for? That's for the people that went to public schools, that graduated from public schools and haven't achieved a breakthrough yet. I mean, we libertarians, a lot of us went to public schools, I did, but we've achieved a breakthrough. We've seen the truth. We've seen the lies these people hurl at us. And when they say a cut, we know that that's a lie. But the mainstream media, you read any article and they'll say, oh, well, they're going to cut spending over the next 10 years. Isn't that nice? They're going to cut spending for the Congress 10 years from now. Now, I wonder what that Congress is going to say. Now, what are you talking about? Those people back there cut our spending? How are we going to win votes if we don't have the ability to spend? It's just nonsense. If you want to slash spending, you want to stand on courage and principle, you do it now. That's what the advantage of not lifting the debt ceiling would have been, is that they would have to start abolishing things. They'd have to live within their means, which is what any family has to do that's overextended. You just start eliminating things that you used to spend on it. Hey, it's a new day. You got to rein in your spending. Well, that's not what these people were doing. And that's not what they're doing over the next 2 years. They are spending out the gazoo, and I'll guarantee you, now everybody, nobody will remember this 2 years from now. But 2 years from now, when the debt ceiling is reached again, we're going to hear the same old nonsense we've heard this time. Oh, catastrophe. Oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Oh, if only we had known that the ceiling was coming up, we would have started cutting spending. Well, what their cut is, the reason it's a lie, is because it's not a cut. They're increasing spending, and they're calling that a cut. And the mainstream media, the public school graduates, I guarantee you, if you did a survey, you'd find most of these mainstream media reporters and pundits and so forth, graduates of public school. And I'm not suggesting private schools are that much better. I mean, they're modeled much after public schools. A lot of the teachers are there, public school graduates. Their money, comes in large part grants and so forth. A lot of these public schools, they have to get licensing, and so when the politician says cut, these people that haven't broken through, they just buy right into it and say, oh yeah, they're going to cut, and everybody's freaking out. My gosh, where are the cuts going to come from? They're not cutting. This is a distortion, a perversion of language. They just changed the word, It's like torture. Redefine torture. Remember when Bush did that? Hey, let's just redefine torture to mean like practically nothing, and then you just go out and waterboard people and you beat them up and whatever, and you just say, oh, well, that's not torture because we've redefined torture. That's what they've done with cut. They've redefined cut where they're not even freezing the level of spending, okay? I mean, that would be one thing if they said, let's just not spend more this year than we spent last year. Let's just keep the level of spending the same. They're not doing that. I mean, they could theoretically say, let's just cut spending 40% across the board. Everything, military, Social Security, everything. Just cut it across the board so that the money coming in through the taxes is equal to the money going out to the dole recipients and so forth. They're not doing that. They're increasing spending. They're going to spend more this year than they spent last year. The next year, they're going to spend more that year than they spent the previous year. They're calling that a cut. Now, how do they do that? Well, the way they define cut is how much they wished they'd like to spend, and from that point, they call it a baseline. This is how much we wish we want to spend, and we're going to reduce it from that wish to a little bit, even though it's more than last year. But we're cutting from our wish. That's what they call a cut. And that's what the mainstream media is bought into. That's what all the pundits, I mean, it's depressing. I mean, it's like, how can these people that, got these really nice public school educations and stuff get into this? Well, it's because what I've been saying, I'm saying it in my articles, I say it in this program. These people are in a status box, okay? I mean, we're all in the box, all right? We're living in a box. It's sort of like the Truman Show. If you saw the Truman Show, Truman was down in this artificial world, and he didn't know it was an artificial world. For him, it was reality. That's what the American people are in. We're all in this status box, and it has Social Security and Medicare and It's got all the things that are in Cuba. Not as much, but all the things that are in Cuba. Free health care, free education, free subsidies, free this, free that, but written around the walls on this deal is free enterprise, private property, and limited government. America has a free enterprise system, and you got schools in this status box that teach the children from the time they're 6 years old. This is freedom. This is free enterprise. This is great. This is a wonderful, work harder, full employment. Go spend money at the mall. That'll make us prosperous. Spend money at the mall. Government needs to keep spending money, I mean, all this nonsense. That's written on the walls. That's taught in the schools inside the statist box. Well, we libertarians, yeah, we're living in the box too, but what's different from us, we know it's all claptrap. We've broken through. We know this is statism. This is not a free society. It's not a free market system. You know, how can you have a free market system when you're coerced into providing for your own retirement? How can you have a free system when you're coerced into giving money to elderly people instead of relying on voluntary charity? How can it be a free system when you're put in jail for ingesting unapproved substances? You see, and these are the questions that we libertarians ask. But let me tell you something. We're in a different world. It's like two universes that are taking place here, because the statists hate this. I mean, when you bring these fundamental philosophical questions into the conversation, man, they're just befuddled. Because you see, what they want, what the statists want, including the statists in the mainstream media, they want everybody to concentrate on how to make the statism work. And so when you bring up something like, well, let's abolish Medicare, there's, oh, Jacob, that's not practical. That's not practical. What do you mean not practical? I mean, isn't practical something that works? And so what they're doing the same thing they've been doing for decades with this welfare state. They've been trying to make it work. I mean, they've had decades to do. They've had since 1930 to make it work. And that's what Greece and Italy and Portugal and other European countries do. They've had decades to make the welfare state work. And so they're all in their little discussion groups, and they're now going to have this committee meeting in Congress, and, oh, how are we going to make this thing work? Because you see, they're not going to abolish anything. They're not going to abolish Medicare. They're not going to abolish Social Security. They're not going to dismantle the military empire. They're not going to get rid of farm subsidies and foreign aid to dictators or foreign aid to anybody. They're not going to get rid of the departments of labor, agriculture, energy. They're not even going to legalize drugs. This 40-year-old failed war on drugs. I mean, there's, you could save a little bit of money. That's a no-brainer, right? No, they're just not going to do that. And so this is all a charade. And so when we libertarians, we enter into the conversation and we say, you got to dismantle this junk. It's just junk. They look at you like, you're not being practical. Well, excuse me, but that's the only practical solution there is, to dismantle this junk, restore a free market system to our land. But man, they're befuddled by this. They're uncomfortable with it. They want everybody to be in the status box, believe that it's free enterprise, and show how to save it. You know, like Franklin Roosevelt supposedly did. Now, you know, there's also the other half of this thing to consider. You know, the Greeks, for all practical purposes, they have basically a welfare state. And they have the same thing we do, that their welfare state kept growing exponentially and draining the private sector. And of course, a lot of the private sector said, what do I need to work for, man? I go out there and get on the dole too. So the private sector was shrinking, the available income and wealth was shrinking, until finally, you know, the speculators and the credit agencies and stuff and start realizing what's happening. They expose it to the people. The government gets all mad and says, oh, you shouldn't tell people this, but it's just telling them the truth. They were ultimately going to discover that the Greek government was busted. That's what's been going on here, okay? The parasitic sector, including the military, has just been growing exponentially, but nobody wants to give it up. The conservatives say, you're not going to take my military away. You're not going to take my military away. You're not going to reduce my military. And Leon Panetta, the war secretary, he just said, I'm not going to permit it. I mean, you know, God, who's in charge here? I mean, that was a nice, revealing little expression. I mean, the military's not going to permit their money to be taken away from them, you know, any more than the Egyptian military, which plays a dominant role in Egypt's affairs, is not letting the Egyptian people affect anything the military does and spends and so forth. Same thing here. The military is saying, we're not going to permit you to do this, and we know what's best for you. And so they've got their empire, their bases all over the world, their resorts, their Lear jets, their nice Gulfstream jets and everything to get the generals and the admirals around and stuff, and their occupations and their sanctions and embargoes and assassinations and renditions and torture and partnerships with dictatorships and suppressing foreigners and drug war in Latin America. They're not going to let go of this thing. And the conservatives are saying, oh, our national security depends on this. You see, this warfare state came into existence soon after the welfare state. I mean, it really got going at the end of World War II. And you know, here what they did was, the statists, they said, oh, well, you know, we need a new official enemy to keep this military environment going. Let's just pick on our old ally here, the Soviet Union. Let's start containing them and circling them and provoking them, and man, so we're off to the races. Now you got the arms race, and oh, the communist threat, and they're coming to get us, and you know, of course, the whole time they were saying socialism inherently defective, they're going to fail, but somehow or another, you know, the socialist system was so powerful and monolithic that we had to have a big military empire, and wars in Vietnam, which, you know, ends up costing the lives of 60,000 American men for nothing, the Korean War, you know, all the hot spots, ridiculous. But the Cold War national security state kept growing and growing and growing, just like the welfare state. They were both growing at the same time. So when the statists say, oh, what happened in Greece can't happen here, what happened in Italy can't happen here, nonsense. Sure, there's a lot more income and wealth here, but we've got the double whammy of the warfare state, the military empire, all those overseas bases, occupations of foreign countries, the dole recipients over here. The liberals are saying, don't touch my dole, don't touch Social Security, don't touch Medicare, don't touch Medicaid. And so you got the big military, the big welfare, and they both, and by the way, they're both committed to each other's programs. Now, liberals are more devoted to the welfare state than they are the warfare state. But that doesn't mean they're not devoted to the warfare state. They are. They're totally devoted to the warfare state. Look at Obama. I mean, this guy's occupying two countries, bombing another. You know, they're spending money out the gazoo. And the conservatives are just as committed to Social Security and Medicare. They get really upset when we libertarians say, time to ditch these socialist programs. They get really upset about that, because they think that freedom means when the government's taking care of you. And so here we've got this double burden, the welfare state, the warfare state, and it's just sucking money out of this private sector, bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And we've seen the result. I mean, you know, the debt's skyrocketing, government spending skyrocketing. Now the government's instruments of indebtedness is being downgraded. You've got the Chinese communists, the premier, foremost foreign lender of the United States government. Did you ever think you'd see that day? When U.S. officials were having to kowtow to the Chinese communists, the people who helped kill umpteen numbers of men in the Vietnam War. That's the regime. Now, it may not be the same people that were fighting the Vietnam War, but it's a successor regime. I mean, it's the same regime. They're successor officials. It's still a brutal communist regime. And that's where they're getting their money. That's who you owe the money to. When they come and levy on your IRAs or whatever, it's to pay, among other people, the Chinese communists. That's what they've done to this country. And so, what do the liberals say is a solution to all this? Oh, well, spend more. I mean, this is absolutely incredible. You can go to the New York Times or Washington Post or any of the mainstream papers, and they will tell you that the secret to this is, the whole secret to this morass is spend more. Now, that's absolutely incredible. Because spending more when you're bringing in less means that you're going to have to keep borrowing more and more and more. It's like maxing out your credit card and you're going and getting another one and another one and another one, and you're just digging yourself a deeper and deeper hole. That's what liberals are saying to do. You see, they're so mired in this statist, Keynesian, ridiculous, idiotic, nonsensical, economic junk that they can't They can't even see how ridiculous that what they're proposing is. I mean, imagine here you've got a deadbeat that's overextended, and they're saying, "Go spend some more." Now, let me tell you what the rationale is here. This is where they say, "Oh, we got to get employment up. We got to get employment up." Okay, what's in their mind? Now keep in mind what they're saying. The liberals, they're saying we're in a recession. So the government's got to spend more money to get the economy going. Got to get the pump primed, or the Federal Reserve has to print the money and start inflating the currency, debasing the currency. Get the economy humming again, and then get people back to work. Okay, now that's what they've been doing for decades. Now, think about this. You've got this deadbeat government, can't pay its bills, borrowing out the gazoo, and how is going to spending more money going to do any help? Well, what their plan is that when they get back to work, when we get the nation back to work, full employment, Obama, better manager, or, whoever, Republican, better manager, that their idea is we'll get all the businesses back to work. Oh, guess what? Now, with everybody working, more people are paying taxes, right, to the IRS, and so all that additional tax revenue is now going to sustain the welfare warfare state, right? Happy days are here again. And then if you say to them, well, now should we slash spending now? Now watch this. Watch this. This is the little sleight of hand. Should we slash spending now that times are good? What do the liberals say? Oh, no. That would be horrible. That would throw us back into a recession. We've got to have the government spend even more money. But what's the problem? Because the tax revenues are flooding into the government. So in other words, in the recession, you spend more. In the good times, you spend more. Now, they won't tell you that. They'll say, oh, no, we promise when the good times come, the government spending is going to be slashed. It never happens because happy days are here. Why should everybody start slashing Medicare and Medicaid and farm subsidies and aid to dictators if happy days are here, right? And that's how. Now you're going to get a sense of how this government through the Federal Reserve has debased the currency since 1913 when the Federal Reserve was established. This is why the dollar is worth about 5% of its value in 1913. Because every decade they've done this. They keep spending and spending and spending and spending and borrowing and so forth, and the Federal Reserve accommodates this by printing the money to pay off the bills, to pay off the creditors, and then they never slash the spending later. And when every time it starts shaking out, the bubbles burst. Because, we all know this is what the Austrians have shown, Ludwig von Mises and Friedrich Hayek, that ultimately the market starts ferreting out this fake funny money that's been printed. And people realize they've been making wrong decisions. They shouldn't have bought a house. The housing industry shouldn't have been building houses. The real money, the capital wasn't there. It was this fake, false printed money that was leading people into thinking that there was this great big pool of real savings that wasn't there. So the Austrians have shown that's when it starts to shake out. That's the recession, the system is cleaning itself out from what the government's been doing by printing the money. And so what do they say? Give it another fix. Give it another fix. I mean, you've got this private sector that's like reeling, like sick. And they say, give him another shot of the heroin. Make him feel a little bit better. Make him come back to life. Well, we've been saying, libertarians have been saying for decades, that works for, a little while. It may have worked in the 50s and 60s. But ultimately, your private sector starts to crater. You can't just keep feeding this government money system into it and thinking that it's going to just go on hunky-dory forever. It can't do that. I mean, the Germans at least understood this, that you've got to at least have sound money. Because once you start perverting your monetary system with printed money, now you're really doubling up the problem. Not only do you have massive debt, now you've got perversions, distortions in the price system that are giving fake and false signals to people. And so each time they have this problem, it shakes out bigger and bigger and bigger. They bring the patient back to life with the injection of this heroin, but next time it shakes out even bigger and bigger. And I've suspected that this could be the big one. I mean, we may be witnessing at this point, because I don't see the Federal Reserve expansion doing any good this time. And I got a feeling a lot of people have caught on. The internet's, in large part for that. You're not gonna hear anything I'm saying here. You're not gonna hear, in your mainstream newspaper. You're not gonna read it in your mainstream newspaper. You'll see it on television, like on Judge Napolitano's show, Freedom Watch, on the Freedom Business Network, the Fox Business Network. You're going to see it on Stossel, but you're not going to see it in the mainstream media. All you're going to hear is go to the mall and spend, and the government needs to keep spending, it needs to keep borrowing. Well, that's just nonsense. They're destroying our country. They're taking us down the bad road. What about conservatives? Well, conservatives are over there trying to preserve their empire, their military empire, in addition to the welfare state. I mean, if you suggest to the conservatives, let's dismantle Medicare, we should never have gotten that thing in there. It's just a big socialist healthcare mess. It's the reason why healthcare is such a disaster. Why can't they see that socialism doesn't work? Look at Cuba, where they have free healthcare and free education and free everything, and in Cuba, in North Korea. But the conservatives, they love it. But the conservatives love their empire too. They really think that the nation wouldn't survive without the big standing army, the military-industrial complex, the Pentagon, the thousands of bases here in the United States, the bases overseas, the big naval fleets, the occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan, the interventions, the embargoes against Iran and the embargoes against Cuba, the assassinations. The conservatives won't let it go. They just won't let it go. And so here you're this nation's in a real pickle. You got the liberals committed to the welfare state. Oh, by the way, the conservatives are committed to the welfare state. You've got the conservatives committed to the warfare state, to the empire. Oh, by the way, you got the liberals committed to the military empire. Then all the miscellaneous spending, the farm subsidies, the education grants, the grants to your community at election time to get your vote. It goes on and on. Education grants, the drug war. I mean, here's a no-brainer. I mean, this brings up the Tea Party, which has been a tremendous disappointment. But, it's not surprising that most of them, or some of them, I don't know what the numbers are. I know a lot of them caved there. And it was so interesting watching these people on television justify their caving, because they themselves admitted that before the debt ceiling vote, the last several weeks, they were standing up there saying, we're Tea Party people, we came to Washington to rein in spending, to rein in borrowing, and man, we're going to hold fast on the debt ceiling. They caved. Now, but it's not surprising that they caved. Why is it not surprising? Because you see, it's easy to exclaim against government spending in the abstract. Oh, I'm against big spending. I'm against big government. I'm against big borrowing. But the problem is that if you believe in the programs they're spending on, you're kind of up a creek. And that's the problem with the Tea Party, is that they really believe in all the statism too. They just are convinced that it can be run on the cheap. That if you just get Tea Party Republicans in there, by golly, they'll be able to run these programs efficiently. They'll be able to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse, the fat from these government programs. But their commitment to the welfare state and the warfare state, unfortunately, is there. I mean, have you ever heard any Tea Party people saying, repeal Medicare, just ditch it, get rid of it? Have you seen them say, repeal Social Security, rely on voluntary charity, rely on children who now would have all that money Social Security taxes that they pay, including all the administration costs, that they would have the money to help their parents out? I mean, isn't that the better system when families are interdependent rather than going to Caesar to be dependent? You don't hear the Tea Party talking like that. Tea Party, they never talk about getting out of Iraq and Afghanistan. They're pledging allegiance. I've been to their meetings. They pledge allegiance. While they're exclaiming against socialism, they pledge allegiance to the flag and never even think about the fact that the Pledge of Allegiance was written by a socialist. I mean, you know, Americans in the 19th century, they didn't pledge allegiance to anything, you know? And so here you got them pledge allegiance to the flag, and then they support the troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. And, you know, how do you support somebody by making them stay in a place where they're dying for nothing? And that's what these people are dying for. They're killing and dying for nothing. And it needs to be said. But the Tea Party won't say it. They say, oh, no, we got to support, you know, the troops. And their concept of supporting the troops is by keeping them there. You know, I say support the troops by bringing them home and letting them live normal lives with their families instead of coming all screwed up and in the head and, you know, missing half their body parts and so forth. But you see, my point is the Tea Party, they had to cave. Well, because they believe in this stuff. So when they saw that their beloved programs, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, farm subsidies, education grants, aid to dictatorships and so forth, and the military empire was going to be jeopardized because they didn't have enough cash coming in, and that the solution to this was to expand the borrowing once again, they chose to expand the borrowing. I mean, you know, what can I say? So what's the, you know, in fact, you know what's the most disappointing thing about the Tea Party? Well, you know, it's disappointing all the way around, you know, because the statists are just, they're statists. I mean, they just won't let go of their statism. But you know what? They had an opportunity. The conservatives had an opportunity here. They could have refused to increase the debt ceiling and just let the government work off cash. And then that's really what they should have done. You know, to watch these Tea Party people on TV and some of the conservatives, they say, oh, well, we can't get everything done in 6 months. You know, we have to do this step at a time. Give me a break. I mean, you do it now, fellas. You do it now. You don't wait 10 years from now or 10 months from now. Now's the time to express courage, to show the commitment of your principles. Make this government work on a cash-only basis. You had an opportunity. One of the funniest things I've heard in this thing is these Republicans that say, well, no, the real problem here is that the Democrats still control the Senate and the presidency. If you put the Republicans in charge of the Senate and the presidency, then we could finally get something done. Give me a break. Who do they think? I mean, you know, they know they can't make that kind of sales pitch to libertarians. We just laugh. I mean, remember when Republicans used to have both the House, the Senate, and the presidency all at the same time? Remember the Republican Revolutionary? They didn't abolish anything. Nothing. Because they believe in this stuff. And here was their opportunity. You see, if they had gone on a cash and carry basis, you know, cash comes in, then the government's got to prioritize. Some people aren't going to get their dole. Yeah, that's right, but we don't have the money to give you your dole. Well, then the Republicans could have said, hey, we need to start abolishing departments. We can't afford it anymore. Lay off those bureaucrats. Discharge them. Put them in the private sector. Private sector, they can handle it, okay? But no, that's not what they did. They could have said, abolish the department. What did Reagan call for? A Department of Education and I think Commerce or something? They could have done that. They could have said, let's at least abolish these needless departments, but they could have gone further. Energy, EPA, HUD, Health and Human Services, Homeland Security, the whole kit and caboodle. They could have said, we don't have a choice. The government can't pay for these things. But no, they caved. They went ahead and did it. But you know what's the most disappointing thing with the Tea Party really is the drug war. I mean, who defends the drug war now? I mean, this is an idiotic venture, immoral to the core. They've destroyed more people. I just saw an article where some government, I think it was the British government today, they record cocaine bust or something. That's all they do. They're living for records. And of course, if they were succeeding, they shouldn't be building, you know, record drug busts. A record drug bust indicates that there's more drugs than there was ever before for the last 40 years. being shipped here. But, to them it's a big victory, big dent in the war on drugs. Yeah, right, real big dent. And so they just keep going on and on. Well, no, libertarians, go, if you're not familiar with the drug war arguments, go to Google drug war libertarians. It's all there. Here was a no-brainer. Here's where the Tea Party could be making some headway. They could say, we can't afford, we want to rein in spending, we want to rein in borrowing. Let's just legalize drugs. Let's get rid of this 40-year prohibition, just like our American ancestors got rid of prohibition of alcohol. Let's get rid of the drug cartels. Overnight, they could get rid of the drug cartels. And all that violence, and they could restore peace and prosperity and harmony in Mexico, where you don't have all these people shooting each other and killing each other. I think the number is up to about 50,000 in the last 6 years alone, 5 or 6 years. It's just a disaster. They got the military down there fighting this thing. Remember when people say, oh, well, if they just would crack down on the war on drugs, that's the solution. Well, Mexico cracked down. They got 50,000 dead people as a result. And, of course, the statists would say it's all worth it, it's all worth it. Here's where the Tea Party could say, save some money, legalize drugs. They're not even doing that. All they're doing, and I've been to their meetings, I know this, they exclaim against big spending, big borrowing, and that's it. Getting rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse of government programs. They never, ever talk about repealing Medicare, which has destroyed America's healthcare system, Social Security, which is the most anti-family value immoral program ever been invented, the military empire. They never talk about bringing the troops home now, immediate, after 10 years of occupation. They don't talk about dismantling the overseas bases, closing Guantanamo. They don't talk about the things that need to be abolished. Farm subsidies, aid to dictatorships. I just don't have a lot of hope for them. So what's the solution to all this? Well, I may be starting to sound like a broken record. The solution is libertarianism. And it's so funny to watch these mainstream pundits when we bring up the libertarian solution. Dismantle the empire. Bring the troops home from everywhere. Korea, Germany, Cold War's over. No need to be occupying Germany anymore. Nazis aren't going to come back to power. Stop occupying Okinawa and Japan. Abandon the bases. Abandon the base in Guantanamo. Everywhere. Bring the troops home from Latin America. They shouldn't be fighting the drug war there any more than we would let them fight the drug war here. Discharge them. Release that huge burden on the private sector in terms of taxes. Dismantle the welfare system, beginning with the crown jewel. Restore faith in ourselves. Have faith in yourself and in others. Families taking care of families. People that can't do it, we rely on church groups, foundations, amelioratory foundations, the whole shebang, the private charity idea. Free market in healthcare. This is a no-brainer just to get rid of Medicare. Lyndon Johnson's socialist program. It's just ridiculous that this thing just goes on and on and on and on, and they indict doctors for stupid regulatory violations, and doctors are fleeing the medical profession en masse because they're so disgusted. Imagine all these talented people retiring early because of this junk system that they've brought us. But when you bring this up with the statists, they just look at you, oh, Jacob, that's not practical. We've got an election coming up. With an election, we got to be practical. Well, there's always an election coming up. If it's not a presidential election, it's a midterm election. What's practical is what works. Only freedom works. Only free markets work. Ask the Soviet people. They had their experience with socialism, central planning. They said the same thing, oh, well, how do we know the right number of sweaters will be produced if the government isn't planning this in a central plan, with the government industries? If we turned it over to the free market, just think, what if not enough sweaters get produced in the right colors and the right sizes? And, and of course Americans look at it and say, what? You can leave that to the total free market. You don't need to worry about that. But then you come over here and say, well, what about repealing our central plan for retirement, Social Security, or Medicare. Oh, whoa. That's different. The state is saying. The state is saying. How do we know that people would really care for their families? How do we know that people wouldn't be dying in the streets from lack of health care? And it's the same attitude that the Soviet people had. But this is the solution. I mean, just think. Think how much money is going to be saved. Think how much money with no more military empire, no more Social Security, no more Medicare, no more any welfare programs. Oh, no more income tax. What do you need an income tax for? Because you don't have this big parasitic blob sucking the lifeblood out of the American private sector. I mean, this is what's practical. That if you have a way of life, and this is why every time in my articles on this show and I go on the air, I try to raise people's vision to a higher level. This is what we libertarians need to be doing. We can't get mired down in the status box and trying to work with them on how to make their status system work. I mean, like when they say, well, what kind of a manager you think Obama's been on the economy? Or do you think the Republicans would be better managers of the economy? And so they have these big debates. Who's going to be a better manager? Going to be Mitt Romney? Is it going to be Barack Obama? You know, and we libertarians say, we're not going to play that game with you because it can't work. It's not practical. You can't have a central manager. You can't have somebody managing the economy and the government. It's not going to work. You're going to end up with nothing but what you have now. Chaos, crisis, perpetual. That really, you shouldn't have a government managing the economy. Oh, that's not practical, Jacob. We got elections coming up. We. That's the only practical thing there is. It's a way of life where people are managing their own economic activity. This is what a free market is. A market that's free of government control, free of government intervention. This is the signpost our ancestors had for us. A way of life where there's no income tax. Americans live without income taxation for more than 100 years. They proved it works. They proved it's workable. That you can have a society for more than a century without income taxation. Everybody keeps what they earn. Oh, voluntary charity. It just happened to be, on the American society, the most charitable nation in history. And not because of an income tax deduction, because there was no income tax. And you got massive amounts of capital. This is the key. This is what liberals don't understand. That it's capital that causes standards of living to rise. Real standards of living, not the paper money standards of living. Where people are more productive and they produce more and there's now more wealth and higher salaries to pay for everybody. That's the key. This is the signpost our ancestors told us. Sound money. No central bank, paper money, funny money, artificial injections, trying to get the patient resuscitated. No. Sound money where people can make sound investment decisions. They know they're going to borrow money. They know it's going to be paid back in the same value that it was loaned in. Whether it's gold and silver coins, let the market make that determination. This is the future. When people say you libertarians aren't practical, what they mean is, we're not trying to win the next election necessarily because we're not going to abandon our principles for the sake of getting into office. What we're trying to do is get this nation on the right road, okay, for ourselves, for our children, our grandchildren, people coming after us. This is a battle against statism. I mean, that's what this really is. The real battle in this country, and this is what I'm saying in my articles, is not between the government and the terrorists. The battle in this country is between the libertarians and the statists. And the statist consists of any kind of colors, conservative, liberals, Tea Party, whatever. But our numbers are growing, the libertarians. People are starting to see, you guys have been right. You've been right the whole time. And so we just let them keep working on their little, elections. How do we get our guys elected into office? And how, keep working within their statist box. What we've got to keep doing is keep building support for the alternative paradigm because their system's going down. Make no mistake about it. Even if they resuscitate the patient, this time, it's going down the next time or the next time because they can't be, at some point you're going to run into the Greek-like situation. And so we're looking for an alternative paradigm, something that works. Hey, status, something that's practical. And the only thing that's practical is the libertarian paradigm. of dismantling the welfare state, dismantling the warfare state, restoring economic liberty to our land, a way of life where people are free to keep everything they earn, engage in enterprise free of government control and regulation, decide for themselves what to do with their own money, share it, donate it, invest it, spend it. That's the key to a wealthy, prosperous, peaceful, harmonious society. Thank you very much. Enjoyed visiting with you guys. I'll see you next week.